and welcome to the All Things Social Impact podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Kanaris, and I'm joined by Helen. Helen, would you like to tell the viewers a little bit about your...
Andrea. My name is Helen, and my Vietnamese name is Huyền. I've just graduated from the Master of Development Practice in the University of Queensland, and now I'm working as the acting manager in the Dignified Work Portfolio in care in Vietnam.
Wonderful. So if I was to ask you, Helen, and the viewers out there, because social impact, I think, means a lot of different things to different people. So it'd be interesting, given your background, given where you're from, given the kind of experiences that you had, what does social impact mean for you?
Thank you for the very wonderful introductions and also the questions. For me, social impact is very important. I've been working in development sector for almost 8 years, and I think social impact assessment means that before you enter to any community, before you start any kind of development project, you have to understand very well about the situations of the community, and that's where when social impact assessment coming. And I think it's a very difficult process for me, but yeah, the overall meanings for me of social impact assessment is you have to assess the all kind of the situation of the community before any kind of project implementation.
Wonderful. I'd have to agree with everything that you said there. It's particularly, knowing about the community before
Yeah.
you go in to speak to them. Was there anything in particular? Because obviously you've had a long career, you've got 8 years. So what attracted you to social impact as a career?
Yeah, so I think that the thing that most attractive for me when it comes to social impact assessment is just fast backward a little bit. Before I work as a development officer, I work in the NGO in Vietnam, so everything I focus is implementation. And then I try to wrote down all the proposal without any kind of knowing what kind of social impact assessment is. I have some kind of theory in my mind, and I also met all of the community members before I write the proposal. But I think social impact assessment is quite a very concrete process that you have to learn about it. You have to know about the methods. You have to know about all of the ideology behind social impact assessment in order to have one. And for me, that's kind of a thing very interested for me. And then I didn't have a lot of time to think about social impact assessment before. And I spent 2 years in the UQ for my master degree. And at that time, I got one of the course that is social impact assessment in my program. And at the time, I was thinking to myself that this is the very interesting for me, interesting topic for me, that I really want to spend more time to learn about it.
So that was your first, I guess, introduction into social impact assessment itself, was when
Yes,
you were at the
yes.
UQ. And I
Hmm.
think that's when I met you, actually,
Yes.
which was really nice. That's when you reached out to me. I think it was through the
Hmm.
UQ mentoring program.
Yes.
So if you think about your first social impact run or how you got to where you are now,
Mm.
and I know yours in the not-for-profit sector, and I think not all people in social impact necessarily end in not-for-profits. Did you focus on particular social issues, or what was it like? What was the process for you in terms of how do you integrate social impact into what you do, and what do you have any specific issues that you focus on?
Yeah, so before I study in the UQ, I my expertise focused on ethnic minorities right in Vietnam. So I work with a lot of indigenous community back in Vietnam, and I think the social impact assessment at that time is more like I have to understand the community before I implement any kind of projects. At the moment, I work in another international NGO. And my program right now focus on the workers, the right of the workers in the garment industry. So I think this is very important to understand the whole situation in the context of garment industry before implementation. And I focus more on like the workers' right, but also on the working conditions and how all of the intersectional issues happen with workers in the garment industry. it's quite a very kind of complicated process, and I'm just kind of
Yes.
entering to this new job. But as far as I understand, that the value chain, the supply chain of garment industry is a huge process, and the garment industry itself is just a very small part of it. And if you do really want to have a very good kind of, social program for one factory, let's say, you have to understand that kind of whole supply chain and how you can, contribute a little bit of your effort and your project into that kind of supply chain. And at this moment, I'm feeling like social impact assessment is more than ever. It's very important. And also, we talk a lot about how to monitoring and evaluate the process, the projects
Yes.
after our implementation. And I think M&E and social impact assessment is kind of like interrelated to each other's. It's have a strong link to each other's. So again, my focus right now is in garment industry.
Yeah, you're right. The links, I believe, between the monitoring and evaluation, as you say, the M&E and social impact can be quite tight. Like, whilst you might veer off into purely M&E at one point, if things are done well, one would hope you start with the social impact assessment first, like understanding those impacts first.
Yeah.
So that's great because you're obviously into a very complex area, looking at the garment industry and the complex supply chains that it sits within,
Yes.
that it's part of. And obviously that comes with a lot of challenges, I would imagine, for you in your career in terms of, how do you practice social impact in that kind of environment? So if you think about the things that has made your job difficult or that have been challenges for you, or is there anything that you felt that, say, you didn't particularly learn at university?
Mhm.
Obviously there's only so much you can cover in a university degree, so it's not to criticize them, but are there things that you feel that it really helps you with, but also that maybe it doesn't necessarily prepare you for the on the ground work? Is there anything that comes to your mind that you would think it would be really great if I knew more about certain things?
Yeah, thank you for the questions. I think there's a lot of things that I learned from the Master of Development practice, especially for the
Yeah.
theories about development. So let's say like we learn a lot about the theory, and in all kind of the courses, all kind of the semesters, we had a lot of debate, and then our essay just focusing on the theory. And then I think it provides us kind of a very strong foundational background of, kind of the preparation stage for us to know what we're going to do.
Yes.
And when it comes, let's say, when it comes to government industry, we're going to understand a little bit about economic redistributions. We understand about social justice. We think about gender equality or intersectionality. It's all of the terms that we learn from the school. But then I think when it comes to actual implementing one projects in the field with the factories, with the real workers, there's a lot of things that I don't think that we don't have time to learn it in the school.
Yeah.
Let's say, for example, like now I'm working, yeah, and trying to build the M&E framework to monitor and evaluate the impacts of the project during the year. So that's kind of the framework I learned somewhere, but it's not necessary in the school. The school just gave me kind of the theory to think about it, to criticize the framework. So that's the thing.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think we didn't have any kind of chance to learn about the toolkits. And that's the thing that the master
Yeah.
degree also don't want to focus on, like the toolkits and framework, actual like kind of the skills that we need to implement in the field.
Yeah.
So I think I remember I also talked to you one time when I were in
Yeah.
Brisbane that
Yes.
social impact assessment is kind of a thing that I'm really interested in. But all of the thing I learned right now is just from the articles. And they also gave me a lot of framework there, but it's just kind of the conceptions. It's kind of like the broad definitions of the M&E and social impact assessment. I do really want to need someone, the mentor, let's say, to talk to me about like how to actually give the indicator, what kind of indicators in the framework looks like, and how to measure it. And someone that I can tell that, let's say, hey, Andrea, I tried this framework before, but it doesn't work. I don't know why. Yeah, so all kind of that is
Yeah.
really important for us.
Yeah, so there does seem to me to be like some more practical application kind of support that
Yes.
from mentors or from
Hmm.
supervisors, whoever, that would be really useful when it comes to the rubber hitting the road in terms of doing either social impact. And I suppose in the management plans, if you're doing a social impact management plan or monitoring and evaluation, then obviously how to actually determine what a measure is, what a metric, useful metric might be for
That's
measuring.
very
Yeah,
complicated. So, I'm thinking about one of the examples.
yeah,
So, often of the time, I think the M&E, the people working in the M&E position, they are not the one actual deliver the activities on the field. So in all kind of the, I think in all kind of the
okay,
organizations. So the framework is initiated, designed by one team, and the one actually have to gather the data collection team is different. So it means that there's a lot of things that it's just impossible for the people on the field to collect the data. So that's
yeah,
why, yeah, I think that's very complicated at that kind of, situation. And if I'm the one have to utilize that kind of framework and, apply in the field, what I'm gonna do with all those framework. Even I learn about it, I know what does it look like, how to use it, but how I can actually adapt it and to fit with my jobs and still deliver all of the outcomes that the M&E framework, the M&E team, or the social impact team want to deliver. So it's very complicated.
yeah. I think
Mhm.
if I'm understanding you right, there seems to be a disconnect sometimes between, because
Yeah.
these projects are, the longevity of them from conception through to delivery can be, I mean, it's not a short period of time. It can be several years between the conceptualization of a project that is designed and then the delivery team, who can be, like as you say, very different. Not only is it that it's a different team, but the time from the conceptualization of the project and the delivery of the project can be
Yes.
quite a few years difference in
Yeah.
terms of that. So things may have even changed on the ground. Is that
Yes.
what I'm hearing
Yes. Yes.
at the time?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the time.
So
Yeah.
if you think, so if I'm hearing, because like in terms of having a better experience in terms of that transitioning from, your university degree, you've got all these wonderful, concepts and ways of thinking about the social issues and the concerns on the ground, and even some insights into what methods may be useful. What is it that you would identify that would be sort of like, if you think, what is the number one thing that could be, or a couple of things that you think could really be the difference between um, a difficult, challenging experience to a far better, smoother experience into actually doing the job when you finally get in there?
So as I understand, the question is
Yeah.
like what kind of the could be the solution, kind of that,
Yeah,
or
what would have helped you the best to have
yeah.
a better, transition into the workplace?
I think the first thing I'm thinking about is how to connect all of the
Yeah,
theories that we learned in the school to the actual jobs that we do. So there's
yeah,
always, like, there's always the disconnection, the gap between the theories and the practice. And to answer
yeah,
the how questions, I think it's kind of the space for us to learn more from other programs. Let's say coaching sections, other program, or kind of the skills or the certificate that we need to actually bridge that kind of gap. Because we do have a theory, but we don't
yeah,
know how to apply it in the field. And we don't know how to use all the tools and combine it with the theories that we have. So the first thing is about answer the how questions, how to connect the gap by
yeah,
join all of the coaching
Yeah. And
sessions.
do you think that,
Yeah.
yeah, right. So is it for you, is it about connecting with people like myself or other practitioners
Yeah.
who have already gone down the path of applying these things in the
Mhm.
field? Do you find that they're not necessarily readily available to you in terms of the people, the professionals, but also the tools that they've used in the past?
Mhm.
Have you found that they're easy to find when it comes to you saying, okay, I've got, I'm in the field now and I've got this,
Yeah.
you said you're building a framework, for example, for the
Mhm.
garment industry.
Mhm.
Have you found it, has it been easy for you to find at least frameworks, existing frameworks that you can draw on to adapt? Or are
Mhm.
you finding that you're starting from scratch?
Yeah, so I think it's not really complicated. It's not really difficult to find the
No.
framework online, right? So there's a lot of
Yeah.
framework provided by a lot of institutions. But the thing is
Hmm.
kind of the skills and the knowledge for us to know how to apply it, to understand which kind of the
Yeah.
framework is best for us. Because there's a lot of
Yeah.
frameworks out there, but yeah, actually when
Yes. The fit
implemented,
for purpose.
yeah. So it's
Yeah.
kind of the mindset, I think. It's kind of like the way of thinking and how to select the best thing for us. Because I think it
Yes.
really depends on the projects that you work on. So we have a different framework. Even is social impact assessment, there's I know a lot of framework for that. So yeah. So that's kind of I think it's more like the
Yeah.
mindset. Yeah. Just so that's the first thing. But
Yeah. And I guess that sounds, yeah.
so the second thing is about the network. I think it's very important
Mm.
that we have and maintain the network of young professionals or senior professionals, of mentor and mentee who can guide us along the way. And maybe just kind of the network that we can work together. It is doesn't necessary that in Australia or in Vietnam, maybe it's the international kind of network that we can keep update, keep post of all of the frameworks, of the trends, or even it's just the experiences of different fields. Yeah. So I
Yes.
think it's very important because when it comes to implementation, when it comes to, a real projects, it's very important if you have a network of people that you can ask them or, just learn from other
Yeah.
people is very best kind of best feeling for me. Yeah.
So I guess if you were then talking to somebody now who was
Mhm.
just in their last year of university, for example, and they're looking to come out into social impact,
Mhm.
would that be do you think, would that be a key bit of advice that you would provide to them in terms of how to ensure you can bridge that gap and make an easier transition into the application of what they've learned?
Yeah. I think for all of the students, even master degrees or like undergraduate, postgraduate or
Mm.
undergraduate, I think it's really important if you have a network of people around you. And I
Mm.
think like in EQ, they offers a lot of opportunities for us to join all the networks, the postgrad students, or even like the mentoring program that I had a chance to talk to you. I think it's very important. And from that kind of network, you can try, try a little bit to bridge the gap between the theory at the school and then all of the actual jobs. So network is very important. But I think this second thing is very important is like don't stop learning. I think is very important. Let's say
Yeah.
there's a lot of, after I graduated in UQ, I tried to search for other certificate that I can learn, like, PMP, project management certificate, or all kind of certificate
Yes.
related to social impact assessment. I think that's when I can actually learn some kind of technical skills for my job. And I can apply all of the things that I learned from UQ to that kind of a certificate as well. Yeah, so I think just don't stop learning. Try to learn. For me, my
Yes.
quota is
That's a, yeah. Yeah. The
one step.
lifelong learning, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think with information, the information that we receive these days that is coming thick and fast, is with IA and all the technology advancements that we're seeing, I think, lifelong learning is definitely a good bit of advice. Is there a particular network that you find has been particularly useful for you since
Yeah,
university?
I think in UQ they have the network of postgrad students they call
Yeah.
the graduate students network. I think it's
Hmm.
very useful for us. But also I really want to have that kind of the kind of network of all of the people working in my field in terms of like all the people interested in social impact assessment, let's say, or all the people interested in community development, that kind of network that
Yeah.
I try to find and try to join all
Yes.
of that work. Yeah, but after my graduation, it's just like 3 months ago, I think 4 months ago. So it's
Yes.
not quite of a long time. But I think
No.
when I changed the locations, like, from Australia to Vietnam, I
Hmm.
bring a lot of kind of the network from Australia to Vietnam as well with me. But I also think all of the network that, kind of regional network between like two countries or
Yes.
regional kind of other countries is gonna very helpful for us to see the projects in the broader views of it. Because I know that at the moment there's a lot of
I think
projects
if
in
oh, you
Vietnam.
you froze there for a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you can go.
You froze just a little bit, but that's okay. This happens with some of these at
Mhm.
times. Um, so if there was what tool do you use? I mean, I know, for example, one of the popular ones, obviously, professional networking is LinkedIn. I know that you use it. Are there other, do you find professional networking tools that you would recommend to people to start using and that you found have been very beneficial for you for the networking components?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is the best kind of
Yeah.
network at the moment, the best tool at the moment. But I
Yeah.
still, trying to learn how to use LinkedIn. Um, because with some of the
Yeah.
people, LinkedIn is just kind of the channel that to find a job. When you get the job, you stop using LinkedIn. But for a lot of people, LinkedIn is
Uh,
like another, yeah, another social media, kind of the personal channel for them to share about their jobs or to learn about other people. And so I think that's the way that I want to, use my LinkedIn for that kind of purpose. Also, I think there's a lot of network from the university, like in UQ. They have the website for all of the people to join in, and they also have the virtual meeting every 3 months or so. So I think that's kind of the network is also very helpful. And the third one is all of the newsletter. Let's say if you interested in some kind of particular program or particular people and they have kind of a newsletter, it's also very good for you to follow that kind of newsletter and just read some articles every now and then, like every month, let's say, to update
yeah.
and kind of improve your skills. So that's three things that I'm using right now.
Yeah. I agree with you with the LinkedIn. I think it's tempting, particularly, I suppose, early in your career to see LinkedIn as just a place to get jobs. But I think definitely it is more than that, and it's a really good tool to explore. There's certainly specific groups. So if you've got interest groups, it's a way to connect with people who've got similar professional interests. A lot of headhunters do get on there, so there's always that job element, but I think there's a lot more of a networking element to it in terms of promoting or getting a higher profile of what you're doing, showcasing the work that you do, connecting with people who do similar work so that you can follow them and hear the kinds of work that they're doing. And it sort of feeds into some of that stuff you were saying about in terms of support. Sometimes that support can be finding people on LinkedIn who have done it before that you can, there's the chat arm, there's the groups, and they've also got the LinkedIn Learning, which also has a lot of really interesting. So yes, I do think with you, it is a very sophisticated tool, and it does go far beyond just finding the jobs. So I'm glad that you raised that one. I think that's useful for most people.
Yeah.
I mean, the job's important, obviously, you got to get the job, but I think there is a lot more useful things on LinkedIn for
Yeah,
people,
yeah,
particularly.
absolutely. Mm,
So if you could hear from any kind of experienced social impact professional moving
mm,
forward, because this is the early days of the All Things Social Impact podcast. So if there was somebody that you could hear from, if there's a social impact professional that you would like to hear from, is there anyone that you can think of that I should invite to speak to in the podcast?
I'm thinking about it.
Anyone
Like,
you'd like to hear from? Yeah.
yeah, I don't have a specific name, to be honest. Like, other than some of my lecturers, some of my teachers back in the UQ. Yeah,
Yeah.
but if I'm thinking about what kind of, like the speakers that I really want to hear
Yes.
from.
What kind of speaker? Yep.
Yeah, I think those people like young professionals, like young people who also work in social impact assessment field. And
Yep.
yeah, so I think like you mentioned before, social impact assessment is not just only for NGO, for nonprofit organizations, but also there's a lot of my friends, a lot of people that I know, they work in government sector, public sector, or they work in private sector. They also use social impact assessment and work in that field. So I do really want to know what kind of the difference between those people working even in the same kind of category, kind of same jobs, but they're in different sector. What's the difference and what kind of the lesson learned and what are the things that I can learn from them. And also it's one of the things I mentioned about the network. I think it's really important if I can connect with other people work in social impact as an impact assessment, but in different sector. So I'm just thinking about that. And there's some of the people, some of my friends in UQ before, they also work in social impact assessment in different countries. And so I think I can,
Right.
yeah, share the contacts to you, or it's really good that you can invite them in this.
Definitely. Absolutely. I think people would really like to hear, and I think that's an important point. And the reason, it's called All Things Social Impact is that social impact does get practiced in very different ways in very different sectors. As you say, there's government, there's not-for-profit, there's private, and in different countries, the context of that social impact can change dramatically, and the issues that they have to address can change very differently. So I'd be happy to speak to anyone that you happen to suggest. The other thing, I guess, is if we get some of those people on, are there two specific, if you only had two questions you could ask somebody, what would they be? What would you ask them? Put you on the spot.
The first question is about their experience. Why did they get that job? And how did they join that kind of the journey of, you know, working in the social impact assessment? I need to explain my questions a
Yeah,
little bit in terms of like,
that's okay. Yeah, please
yeah.
do.
So when I graduate, I'm thinking about social impact assessment and I'm thinking like, I really want to work in this field as the one that can do like my jobs is like social impact assessment officer or specialist. But I realized
Yes.
that in order to do this, you need that kind of extensive experience in kind of the very specific area, like environment or mining, let's say. So I'm thinking it's really hard for a very young graduate to start, joining social impact assessment without any kind of experience in that kind of field. I do have the experience in development sector, but as the project officer. So it kind of like not really related. So yeah, so the first question is about how,
Yeah.
why, how did they start?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And I
think
think it
this,
is very different for different people. So it'll be an interesting question to ask as we get them
yeah.
in. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the second question is also about in their field, in their area, what is kind of the lesson learned? What is, what does it look like? What social impact assessment looks like in their area?
Yeah.
And how do they, you know, communicate, collaborate with other people in different sector to implement the
Yeah.
social impact assessment projects. Because I remember that I talked to you the other day, that if I work into social impact assessment, let's say in mining, I don't have any kind of the experience or knowledge in mining. How can I do my jobs without any kind of knowledge in that sector? So yeah, just I'm very interested in that kind of topic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think it's a really interesting point. There's a lot of focus a lot of the time. And I've come across it in my career, where there's, different industries will go, what's your experience in mining? What's your experience in, renewable energies? What's your experience in wind farm or solar or whatever you happen to be working on? And the truth of the matter is, and it's probably something we all have to learn a little bit as we go along, is that realistically, as a social impact, it's not about the project. They've got plenty of technical experts in engineers who understand that industry per se in terms of its operations and the like, which is information we draw on, because what we're actually doing for them is actually telling them about their community and how it might impact the community. So it's a different focus. And I think that we probably have to get really good at and better at articulating that for our clients to say, well, you've already got that expertise, my expertise, and I'll be drawing on your knowledge of it so that I understand, so I can interpret that to how it may affect the community. But my expertise is the community, not the project itself. So yeah, it can be difficult because a lot of times people do ask for that expertise, and when you're first starting, you don't have that. But I've heard that kind of question, Helen, in lots of ways, even where you get someone who's just out of uni and they go, we want someone with experience, and it's like, well, you can't have, a graduate with experience because they haven't been in the workforce. Like, obviously there's ways you can get some. There is, internships, there is, some volunteering work with companies, but it does seem like a bit of an unreasonable expectation sometimes when they put high levels of expectations. But again, I think, it's about articulating what you bring to the table,
Yeah, absolutely.
things,
Um,
and
oh, I,
it is a tough one.
I know there's two questions, but I also think about the third one.
That's okay, but we're going to let you have a third one. Being the first person, you're going to set a precedent now to get a third question.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions in my mind about that. But I think I'm also thinking about we would talk a lot about framework and toolkits. But I
Yeah.
also think about when it comes to working with the community. So we always know
Yes.
that toolkits and framework is just a part of the process. So what kind of the
Yes.
principles when they work with the community when it comes to assess the social impact of the development projects? What is the principles and what kind of the challenge when we work with community? We learn a lot from the school about all of the case studies about the challenge when working with communities. But actually, I really want to hear from the person with experience working in the field, and to see what kind of thing they've been
Yes.
through.
Oh, well, I think that ties in. I think that's twofold because that helps me in sense of identifying people with that various experience of, I think, the different locations of applying social impact, because there's, rural and remote communities that are reliant on mining, for example, in Australia, will be very different than, say, a developing country somewhere that has a community reliant. There'll be similarities, but the contexts and the environments will definitely provide very different challenges. So perhaps a mix of people who've got experience in on the ground of how to speak to sort of particularly vulnerable groups, I would imagine, when you're talking to traditional owners, and how do you what are the protocols to adopt in proper engagement with communities? Yeah. We can certainly do that. Perhaps I might have to. I certainly don't. I'm certainly resisting wanting to answer all those questions for you, Helen, because I don't want this to be all about my experience. What this podcast is about is me identifying for everybody so that they're not hearing just from me, but that they're hearing from a range of different practitioners with a range of experience. So what I'll do is refrain from diving in with you on those things. Although what I will do is maybe have at the end of the talking to the people in the early career, because I'm having about 5 or 6 people in early career to kick off this podcast, is maybe at the end of that I'll do a little session where I try and answer some of these questions from my perspective, and then we'll get in other people and ask those questions to them. So I just won't answer it in the here and now. What I might do is collect all those questions from all of the 5 of you and maybe do a little response to those questions at the end of this little mini series of early career interviews or discussions that we're having.
For you, joining all the discussions, and because I talk to you a lot of times and I know that your experience and knowledge about the field is just huge. And then I just really want to, like hearing more from you. And I also know that there's a lot of people working in the social impact assessment and they all have the different experience and knowledge. And I think it's very good it's very useful for us to hearing for all of you about this. And I'm also thinking about because now I'm working as the project manager, but I also think even that M&E or social impact assessment is a part of our jobs. So I cannot separate it. It's still a very important part of my jobs that I need to improve my skills. So it's just very helpful for me to follow your newsletter and also the podcast.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you to join us, and thank you for your very thoughtful reflections on your career and your journey into social impact and your wonderful experience doing amazing work in Vietnam and drawing on both your previous experience and obviously your social impact journey coming together to provide that really important role that you play. So thank you for taking the time, because there is a time difference and it's a Sunday afternoon, so people can know that you're very dedicated. And I thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed the first episode of the All Things Social Impact podcast. Remember to hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes.